I know some people in the room will still sign contracts because some suit said they got to sign it and it can't be changed. But I'm telling you from experience, the doctors who do that are missing out on valuable money for themselves and for their families. The reality of it is in my best interest as a hospital executive to pressure you into signing a deal that's not in your best interest. I don't care how nice they are. I don't care how much of a red carpet they rolled out for you. It is a business. And as a hospital executive, I make more money when I pay my doctors less.
See Jerry Maguire for doctors. It's Ethan and...
During the workshop, we're going to learn how to do 3 things. First, how to make the most money in your first contract, pay down the mountain of medical education loan debt that I suspect most of you have, like many of the doctors I work with. And then lastly, how do you maintain being a whole person? While, yes, you're all amazing surgeons, you all likely have interest, priorities, goals outside of your practice. And so how can we honor those as well? And then lastly, take away your stress and not work you into an early grave.
Take it from me. I'm a doctor, and I'm amazing at negotiating contracts.
Doctors are bad at contract negotiation. This might feel jarring because doctors are so intelligent, you're so smart, and you're good at just about everything you do. But there is a misconception about doctors feeling as though you're better at negotiating contracts than you really are. Here's why I can say that. I spent 15 years working in hospitals. I saw firsthand doctors coming in to negotiate with my CEO and how poorly that went for my doctors on a regular basis. Doctors don't get any training in contract negotiation, so you're not supposed to be good at it. I could never care for a patient because I haven't had a single minute of training in medicine. So here's why. First and foremost, just like my training in medicine, doctors don't have any training in contract negotiation. How could you expect to be good at it when it's just something you're not exposed to? I went to law school. I spent 15 years working in hospitals. I sat in classes called negotiation. So this is what I do all day, every day. And more important than what I do, it's what the people that you're negotiating your contract with have done. So they have this training. Secondarily, doctors are really good negotiators, just not in the realm of contracts. So I often share my PCP, for instance. I told her I wanted to get off blood pressure medication, and she's like, well, then you got to cut down on your burgers, your beer, and your XYZ. All right, that's a negotiation, right? She got me to do something I didn't want to do to achieve a goal that I was motivated to. So doctors are phenomenal negotiators in the context of negotiating with your patients about their options for care. And then lastly, the Dunning-Kruger effect. Basically, it says that really smart people think they're really good at lots of things, even if they're not necessarily trained in that realm. And I think that that's just a hurdle that doctors sometimes fall into with contract negotiations. Here's my view of the world in terms of where it comes from when doctors go into your first contract thinking that you don't have the power to negotiate. If you hear nothing else from our conversation, I want for you to know in your first contract, you can and you must negotiate. You can and you must negotiate. Far too often I hear first-time attendings say, well, I didn't feel like I had power. I didn't want to lose the offer. I didn't want to upset them. You can and you must negotiate. It is expected. I'm working on this hypothesis that I believe that part of the reason that doctors, especially first-time attendings, don't negotiate their contracts is because you've spent so much of your career being told exactly what to do, how to do it, and you take your superior's word for it because that's what you're supposed to do. But now when you come out of training, this is the first time in your careers where it's like, hey, what do I want? How do I want to practice medicine? Where do I want to practice medicine? What type of support do I want? And so this is going to be a paradigm shift for many of you as you go into your first contract and start talking about the things that you want as opposed to what the terms being dictated to you are going to be. I want to encourage you, just because you're bad at contract negotiation doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. It amplifies the importance for you to advocate for yourself through that process. And through our time today, I'm going to give you all the tools you need to know how to get what you deserve in your first contract. I want to amplify why it's so important for doctors to negotiate your contracts. When you get into practice, this is what experienced doctors complain about in their medical practices. First and foremost, I don't have the authority I need to take care of my patients and do the changes I need to take care of my patients. There's too much bureaucracy. And then lastly, my buddies are all making more money than me. And so how can you address these pain points that experienced doctors have articulated to Medscape? How can you alleviate these pain points by addressing them in your first contract up front? So this is one of the things that I think doctors find out the hard way. When I worked in hospitals, part of my job was reporting to my CEO what the value of our doctors was. I would look at how busy you are, what CPT codes you're charging, how many procedures you did in a month. And then I look at what is my revenue from insurance companies for your procedures. And that's going to be what we call your return. And then your expense is how much my doctors cost. What is the salary? What are the related expenses to my doctors? And then the balance between what we make off of you and what we pay you is called a return on investment. I only worked in nonprofit, faith-based hospitals, and we knew down to the dollar how much doctors made us. This idea that, well, it's just for-profit hospitals. No, every hospital is looking at you like a steak dinner. How much money can Dr. Smith make me this year? And how little can I pay them to inflate how much I'm making as a hospital? Actually, my mom's a doctor. And when I started my firm, she pointed this out. And she said, Ethan, there is going to be a gap in the salary for women doctors that needs to be addressed. The data bears it out. This is a report from Medscape that shows women doctors make about $100,000 less than men on average. There's also some disparities along racial lines. And I shared this because it's important for doctors to have context in terms of what you're negotiating. And then lastly, if you guys are like any of the doctors that I work with, you have 6 figures in student loan debt. How do we get our doctors to pay that down as quickly as possible? Well, the answer is we get other people to help. We get your employer to help. We get the government to help, which many of you probably already are. First and foremost, your employer. You must ask for education loan debt assistance. This is an amount that your employer, whether it's a private practice, academics, large hospital system, they will pay directly towards your student loan debt. This amount can be anywhere between $25,000, $45,000, $50,000 per year of your employment. This is not chump change. I have some doctors who have $500,000 plus in student loan debt. That makes this even more important for them because that 13-year payoff, I want you to cut that down to 10, to 8, to 5, right? Or even better, maybe pay less than that if you can. But ideally, I want you to have as much money going to your lifestyle and your life rather than going to paying down debt. First, your employer should pay. Secondarily, during the interview process, ask your employer if they are PSLF eligible or if the employer is a 501c3. Those are the 2 questions that will help you understand if the employer is eligible to participate in the PSLF Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. And then lastly, ask for more money and then use that extra bump in your income to go towards student loans. So you know that I'm not blowing smoke. I'm going to show you some actual results for doctors that we work with so that you all know that this is achievable for you. First, this is a plastic surgeon out of Indiana, rookie doctor. Range based on MGMA, which is kind of the gold standard for physician salaries, about 300, so maybe a little bit more than that, 350 potentially. This doc got about 500. We got her 3 offers. And ultimately, the goal for all of you going through this process should be to get between 2 to 3 offers for employment. The reason for that is because now you can easily say, well, I have an offer for more money, better terms, better support. What can you do to match that? As opposed to saying, I'm a better surgeon than that, pay me more money. Or my buddy got more money, why don't you pay me more? That never works. So when you have multiple offers, you can use those as leverage to negotiate your offer. I want to give you the answers to the test. So first and foremost, you must start with what matters most to you. I interview every doctor we work with as we're building your profile, and I ask you, of these 7 things, what are the most important 3? And of the 75 doctors we've interviewed, they all say the same 3 things. Now, in different orders, but these are always the top 3 things. Doctors care about my personal time, having a schedule that's flexible and dependable, and being paid a competitive wage for my work. These are not lofty goals, right? These are very reasonable goals that many of us want in our own jobs. I want to encourage you as you go into your contracts, Don't focus on as much what the employer is dictating to you as much as what are the things in each of these categories that are important to me. What schedule would fulfill my lifestyle goals? What type of compensation would allow me to achieve my financial goals or my lifestyle goals as quickly as possible. When it comes to doctors' compensation, our eyes typically gravitate towards that big, sexy, six-figure number, culture-based salary, right? And that's the number that everybody's curious about. Is it a good deal? Is it a bad deal? But the thing is, it's just one component of a larger package of your compensation. First and foremost, your base is what you get for showing up and doing no harm. That's the money that you get for showing up on time, doing your job, being a good employee. Secondarily, your bonus. This is money that you get for taking an action or completing a goal. It could be something as simple as signing a contract and then you get a signing bonus, or it could be something as involved as helping your hospital or your practice improve its surgical site infection rate. There's compensation tied to those clinical metrics. And now these are not major dollars, $12,000 to $15,000 on average nationally. And then lastly, your bennies, your base, your bonus, and your bennies. Your bennies often get overlooked because your benefits cannot be deposited into a bank based on your bonus can. But this can be incredibly valuable to you, or potentially detrimental to you. Your malpractice, your paid time off, your education loan debt support, all of these things that add a tremendous amount of value to your life, but you cannot deposit them into a bank. When you go into your interviews, ask for the employer's benefits package for physicians. They'll typically share that with you, which will highlight a lot of the health plans, dental, vision, etc. that's available to you as a physician employee. And this is the journey. This is exactly how you go from training to your first job. So the first thing that you're going to do, even before you start submitting applications, is figure out where you want to be geographically. You cannot compare offers from all over the country. You need to have a geographic focus. Having 2 to 3 top cities or regions is ideal. Let's say you said Illinois, Michigan, and Indiana, right? Those 3 areas are relatively comparable in terms of cost of living, type of practice, so you could reasonably look at jobs in those 3 areas. I have some doctors who say, well, you can have offers in New York and California. How do I compare them? And the answer is you can't. You cannot compare an offer in California to an offer in New York because the context of them is so different. Before you begin submitting applications, identify 2 to 3 of your top geographic locations and narrow your search there. I guarantee you it's going to make your life easier and you're going to be able to compare your offers in a more reasonable way. Once you have your geographic locations identified, then you start submitting job applications. There's 2 ways to do that. One, you can go to a place like Practice Link that aggregates job postings, or find the employers within your radius and identify the employers that meet your criteria as far as what type of setting you want to practice in, scope of practice, the type of patients you want to care for, if there's certain preferences that you have. So find the employers that you want to potentially work with, and then go directly to their job boards to submit an application for a job within the practice or within the hospital. Then once you submit an application, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to get either a phone call or an email from someone who's called an internal recruiter. That internal part means that they work for the employer, and their job is to move you along the process from applicant to employee. First thing they're going to do is gauge your interest in the next steps in the process. This is what we call a screening call. They're going to screen you to figure out if you're a candidate to move forward for a full interview, and then eventually a site visit. Typically, there's going to be 2 phases. You're going to do some kind of virtual interview, maybe a phone interview, and then the non-negotiable part, if it's a job you're serious about, is you must do a site visit. You must see the facilities you'll be in, practice, the staff, the leadership, the facilities, the equipment, the supplies. All of those things you need to have eyes on. You do not want to be surprised your first day of work. And then your goal is to identify your top 2 options. You're going to go on this circuit of interviews, you're going to get some offers, and then eventually you want to have at least 2. My goal for my doctors to have 3, but at least 2 offers that you can compare. And what you're going to do is you're going to negotiate those offers, right? You're going to say, hey, employer A, can you update this, and this? Hey, employer B, can you update these other things? And then eventually you have the final version the best version of your final offers that you can compare side by side. And once you do that, you're going to make a decision. Typically, that decision comes in the terms of signing what's called a letter of intent or an LOI. Sometimes it's called an offer letter. You sign the offer letter. What you see in the offer letter will be exactly what you see in the employment agreement. Letter of intent is not binding. If you sign the letter of intent and then walk away, there's no consequences, right? It's not binding in any way, but it is binding in the sense that if you sign it, what you see in that LOI will be in your employment agreement. So I had a first-time attending reach out earlier this week to say, hey, do I need to negotiate the offer letter? And my answer was a resounding all caps, yes. This is the part that doctors often first-time attendants don't often recognize or appreciate, is that there's this 90 to 120 day HR process that you cannot speed up. This part is purely under the employer's control. And if you do not get these other pieces started fast enough, it's going to make this part really painful in terms of getting started on your job on time. Make sure that you allow yourself at least 90 to 120 days for all of the HR nonsense, background check, drug test, blah, blah, blah. Again, you cannot control that. You cannot speed it up. So this part you can't change it. You can impact all of these parts up front, but you can't change this part. So it's important to make sure you have a buffer for that. And then I also encourage my first-time attending clients, take a break. I know there might be some circumstances that certain doctors are not able to take a break, financially or otherwise. But if you can afford it, I always encourage my first-time attending clients, take a break between training and your first job, because you're not going to get that again. So take some time to reset your mind, decompress, get a massage or two, and then start your job. You need to be thinking about where you're going to live, where you're going to move to, and how long is that process going to take. Because that's going to be, again, something that you may not be able to speed up yourself. As I mentioned, I'm going to give you the exact things that we do to help doctors negotiate the best deals so that you can go do it for yourself. The single biggest mistake doctors make is getting one single job offer out of training. When you have one offer, you are in as vulnerable and exposed a position as you can possibly be. Doctors who have 2 to 3 offers now have confidence. Now they can say, yes, I like this offer, but I know there's better out there because I have 2 other offers on my desk for more money, better terms, better support, better schedule, etc. So you must have 2 to 3 offers truly to have any reasonable chance to negotiate in a meaningful way. So 2 to 3 offers is really the sweet spot. And then we get the salary data. We get a range of what your salaries should be. Get the data. The data I just showed you costs money, so I don't suggest you buy that. Not because you can't or you shouldn't, it's just probably going to be a waste of money, because let's say you buy it, you go to your negotiation, your employer's like, we don't care, then you've wasted $3,000 on that data. I would encourage you to look at some of the free resources like Doximity, Merritt Hawkins, Medscape, Physician Thrive is another one that I use. They're good, but they won't provide you with, tiers, but they will provide you with average salaries for certain specialties. This is something you should also do to prepare yourself to go into your contract negotiations. Short contracts, 2 to 3 years max. Anything longer than that, you're putting yourself in a tough spot. The reason for that is because you're going to get think about as an intern, right? You're going to get really good over the 6 years that you have in training. And that same thing is going to happen as an attending, just faster. You want to make sure that as you get really proficient as an attending, you want to make sure that your contract is updated to reflect how good you got at your job in those first 3 years. Make the most money. I know money is not the only thing. It's not even the main thing for a lot of doctors, but it is vitally important for you to make sure that you're setting yourself up for long-term success. I get hired mostly by doctors after their first contract because they found out the hard way that I'm getting paid less than my colleagues by like $30,000, $50,000. I'm working more than my colleagues. I'm taking more than my fair share of call. There's all of these things that doctors find out the hard way about medicine that I want to encourage you to advocate for yourself now. I know it's going to seem hard. I know you're making like $70,000 in training and then your salary is going to jump to $500,000. Why would you negotiate that? Because you're not comparing your resident salary to your attending salary. That's not fair comparison. You're comparing your attending salary to other attending salary. You don't want to be paid less than other doctors doing the same work. And then lastly, when you go into your negotiation, talk about the things that matter to the employer. How busy can you be? Your quality, how amazing of a doctor you are. But do not talk about the things that matter to you as an employee. In fact, these are the things that matter to your employer about whether or not they're going to pay you more money. First and foremost, how busy can you be? It's a general rule of thumb that the busiest doctors make the most money. You want to make more money? Be busier. I have some doctors who say, I want to be paid and also have some semblance of a social life. Cool, then let's build a compensation package that isn't as focused on you being the busiest doctor, and let's focus on you getting paid a higher base salary and having more free time for your personal ambitions. Secondarily, if any of you have subspecialized skills, that's incredibly valuable. For those of you who don't have subspecialized skills, there's another way about this. Let's say you go to an area of the country where there are only a few or no plastic surgeons like you. That makes your skills specialized. So not just having subspecialized skills, but using your generalized skills in an area where nobody else or only a few have those makes those skills specialized. So I want to encourage you as you're looking for jobs, if any of you are looking in areas that are a little harder to attract talent to, that's where you can ask for more money because you're going to be one of one or one of a few who do that. As I mentioned earlier, clinical quality bonuses, $12,000 to $15,000 for improving clinical quality metrics. Not chump change, but also maybe not going to change someone's life, but that could be a vacation for someone. Years of experience is not going to be relevant now, but generally your salary should go up as you practice. Do not do volunteer work on the clock. I love my doctors who do volunteer work in their personal time. That's awesome. I support that, and I'll help you achieve that. What I do not support is my doctors doing volunteer work on the clock. So if your employer asks you to do leadership, take on committees, run programs, you need to be compensated for that. Far too many doctors I talk to are doing work that they know they should get paid for that they're not, and their colleagues are getting paid for. So don't be the chump who's doing free work on the clock, not getting paid for it. And then lastly, where you are in the country is going to have a major impact on your compensation. And we're going to talk about some other things that impact that as well. But generally, geography is a really big dictator of what the compensation range is going to be. The general rule of thumb that I use is if you are looking at a job in a large metropolitan area that lots of people want to be in, your salary will be lower relative to cost of living, as opposed to if you go to a place where fewer people want to live, then your salary will be higher relative to cost of living. So the more attractive a place, the lower the salary relative to cost of living. The less attractive a place, the higher the salary relative to cost of living. This is one of the other most important contextual factors to doctors' compensation. Typically, private practices make the most money because there's fewer layers of administration between the insurance payer and the patient. As you move along that spectrum, you get to multi-hospital health systems where I worked. Now you've got a bunch of suits in there, right? People like me who are running analysis. You've got all of these administrative costs and administrative burdens. So now the insurance dollar comes, it's got to pay all these expenses. Then it gets to the doctor. Then it gets to the patient. So the salaries are lower the more layers of expenses and administrative fluff there are. And then you'll notice here, academic hospitals tend to be one of the lower paying because that's typically where the brightest minds want to be already. And typically you're going to see there's going to be some structure to those packages. And so you're going to go negotiate different things. I won't go too far into academics. I don't know if any of you are interested in that, but typically with private practice, hospital systems, we're talking about compensation and support. In academics, we're talking a lot more about how do we use your time, because you're going to typically split between administrative, teaching, and clinical. And so how do we maximize your time for the things that you want to prioritize in your practice?
Are there any resources that talk about some of those other kinds of compensations? Like if you're asking for, for student debt assistance, like where do you start with an ask? Or if you're asking for a bonus, or if you're asking for a signing bonus, like where do you start with those numbers?
Yeah, great question. I'll just show you. Those resources I just talked to you about, Merritt Hawkins, Medscape, etc., they have that. So this is education loan debt assistance. This is from 2022, average $100,000, and this is over the term of the contract. That could be a 4-year contract, $25,000 a year. It could be a 2-year contract, $50K a year. But on average, doctors should be getting about $100K. CME, I can just tell you offhand, is about $5,000 a year. So typically I'll say for my docs, I'll say $5,000 and 5 days, which means that I want you to have 5 days of administrative time for each of your board specialties. So if you're double boarded, you get 10 days and 10 grand. Signing bonuses, I don't take anything less than 30 grand. For my doctors, relocation, I typically will ask for between 12 and 15. For my doctors, get that paid out as a stipend up front. You said the word aggressive. And I hear that word a lot, and I try to take that out of doctors' vocabulary in terms of contract negotiation. I often hear I'll talk to experienced doctors and they're like, I'm really good at negotiating, I'm really aggressive. It's like, no. You don't have to be aggressive. That's not at all what we're doing here. The way for doctors to truly negotiate and have leverage and get those hands untied is by having that second offer. So that's truly the litmus test. And I tell this to experienced attendings as well. You don't have to go in stomping around, pushing papers across the table, telling, I'm going to walk if you don't have to do any of that. That stuff is kind of like the Grey's Anatomy of being a doctor. The real version is I have 3 offers from employers. I'm really excited about all 3 of them, or else I wouldn't be talking to them. And so I'm looking forward to joining you. I'm optimistic about all the things I can bring to this practice. I'm just hoping you can match my offer from employer B and C. And if you can't do that, that's okay. Then I have other offers I need to walk to. It happens mostly with men, where there's this idea that I'm really good at negotiating because I'm really aggressive. It's no, dude, that has nothing to do with it. That's again, the Grey's Anatomy of being a doctor. And so for those of you, and this kind of goes back to what we first talked about, you're going to feel like you don't have power. I told doctors thousands of times, to standard contract, Alex, what are you going to do? That is not true. It's not every contract standard until it's not. It's just not true. So it is so important for doctors to have that second and third offer. So that way you can say, I'm so grateful for this, but I can't turn down another $50,000 a year or the support that I need in my practice to provide the highest level of care. I just can't turn that down. So if you can't meet me, then I have to walk. And being able to walk away is the most relieving feeling doctors can have in contract negotiations. Far too often, doctors will have one contract, and it's I want to work with them. I'm so excited. I just want to sign. And then you find out 6 months in, a year in, you're and then you end up calling me, and now we got to dig you out of a crummy situation. I'm a little bit surprised at how many doctor couples I've worked with. I've had probably 4 pairs of couples negotiating at the same time. And then even above and beyond that, I'll be talking to a client, and then their spouse is a doctor who's in the background. So I'm just shocked at how many couples of doctors there are. But I think the primary considerations there would be making sure that you are both aligned on your timing. The tough thing with getting your first offers sometimes is that they'll come in at these weird intervals. First and foremost, get your timing lined up. The most frequent thing that I write for doctors is, I need more time. I'm super grateful for the offer. I'm swamped with training, family, personal, blah, blah, blah. I need more time. We've never had that request denied. And just to be sure, when we write those things to employers, we write it to the doctor, and then the doctor sends it to the employer. So we're not seen or heard by your employers. I would say get your timing synced up. And then, I know you didn't say this, but if you're in the same employer, your power is amplified. Because now it's not just the revenue that one doctor could bring, it's the revenue that 2 doctors can bring. So hugely, hugely valuable if you're both talking to the same employer. If you're not talking to the same employer, the much more important thing to think about is getting your timing synced up. And then you're still using that same framework of, hey, I'm super grateful to be here, but my spouse is going to be working across town, so I'm going to likely find a job over there. Is there anything you can do to make me having to drive across town more palatable? So can you bump up the base salary? Can you provide a company car? Are there things that you can do to make my life easier to allow me to join this practice, knowing that my spouse is going to be somewhere where it's less convenient for me to be here? I think timing would be the most important thing. I often say doctors are stronger together, but for some reason we're so conditioned to be a one-person army and go into it on your own. But talk about your salaries, talk about your compensation. That's power when doctors come together like that. Way too often I see first-time attendings sign deals because they feel pressure from the employer. When I was on the hospital side, when I would send out a contract to a doctor, especially a rookie doctor, I would say, hey, review it, send it back within 2 days, 3 days. There's no way any of you in this room could get a contract, stop what you're doing, and have time to look through a dense-ass 40-page contract. That's just not going to happen. But employers do that because they know that you don't have the time and you're just going to sign it. Maybe I'm talking about someone in the room. I hope that I'm not. But for those of you who are getting ready to go into this experience, please do not make the rookie mistake of just signing what they put in front of you because they told you you have to sign it tomorrow. Please don't do that. If you feel that pressure, text me. I'll give you the cheat sheet, which you'll say, hey, I'm super grateful. I just need more time. I've asked for my doctors for up to 6 weeks and they've gotten it. Please do not sign a deal just because you feel pressure. It might even be a good deal. You won't know, but don't sign a deal without actually taking the time to look at it and understand what's in your contract. First time attending especially, I think, feel pressure to move fast, or else like it's going to get pulled or something, which is not realistic. Can't allow that pressure to impact you because the pressure is not relevant. If an employer is saying you need to sign this by a certain day, well, why? What's going to happen? Is someone going to die? Is the hospital going to go under if I don't sign it? What's the why behind it? I'll tell you what the why is. The why is my executive above me is saying we have an open requisition for an employee. Why is it still open? It has nothing to do with you as a doctor. It has everything to do with my administrative priorities. That's not relevant to you. And so I want to encourage doctors. It is your right. This is the biggest decision to date of your life. Take the time that you need. Now, here's the thing. What you said is exactly true. It will not happen that your offers come in at the same time. One, that's my job. But two, that's the part that you're going to have to orchestrate. So first of all, you start the job search process. You're submitting applications around a certain time frame. Then you start getting those calls that come in, interviews, etc. And then after the site visit, that's typically when you're going to get the LOI. Now the timing gets really wonky because you're flying around the country, maybe you're driving around town to get to these interviews, and then eventually you're going to get an offer. The way you manage that is simply by saying, I'm really grateful for the offer. Can you give me until this date to review it? And then that date should also address, I have 3 other interviews coming up. I expect LOIs around this time. I'll give you the spoiler, timing will not line up. Employers will pressure you. Do not allow that pressure to change your behavior. It is purely an arbitrary administrative deadline that I, as a hospital suit, have made up. Now, I know some people in the room will still sign contracts because some suit said they got to sign it and it can't be changed. But I'm telling you from experience, the doctors who do that are missing out on valuable money for themselves and for their families. Doctors pay me a lot of money to tell them the harsh truths of the reality of the business of medicine. I am telling you from experience, when hospital executives pressure you, they are doing that for reasons that only matter to them. It only matters to them. So, like I said, text me. I will give you the language. I write these on a weekly basis. We ask for more time, and not once has it been rejected. Now, I've had some doctors ask for 6 weeks for exactly the reason that you just articulated. I've got 2 interviews coming up. I don't know when these offers are coming in. If that 6 weeks was granted, how urgent was it that contract got signed? The reality of it is in my best interest as a hospital executive to pressure you into signing a deal that's not in your best interest. I don't care how nice they are. I don't care how much of a red carpet they rolled out for you. It is a business. And as a hospital executive, I make more money when I pay my doctors less. That's just the economics of hospitals.
I have one more question. It relates to what you were talking about in terms of committee work and other things that you're doing that you're not necessarily compensated for. And I feel like it's particularly problematic because a lot of those things are time consuming and then you're like not doing physical work with practice, but that's like being compensated. So can you, and a lot of that happens after you've taken the job. So how do you have that conversation of like, sure, I'll do that, but you're going to pay me for that without saying those words and making it more like you don't want to look like you're not a team player. So can you talk about like what the best way to handle those when someone asks something of you like that?
I say this all the time, especially to like the smartest doctors. I often say, play dumb. You guys are so smart that I feel like sometimes you don't use the play dumb card in your repertoire. So one way to do that is, hey, can you tell me what's the stipend that comes along with the work with this leadership opportunity? I've never done anything like this. What's the pay that comes along with this? Be curious and act like you don't know. Hey, is there any pay that comes along with this? And if they say no, that's kind of weird that you would ask me to do work and not be offering any type of compensation for my time. The piece that you said that I want to amplify, which is very practical. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you to take on more responsibility. I need you to run my clinical quality outcomes committee and my surgical site infections committee. And then when you go into your clinic, you're not as busy as I need you to be. So I'm going to pull you into my office, take more time out of your day, and I'm going to tell you, hey, Dr. Smith, I need you to be busier. I need you to see patients faster. I need you to do more surgeries. Why aren't you doing that? Well, because you asked me to lead the surgical site infection committee and the quality committee. Yeah, but that's outside of your clinical work. So why are you dropping here? So it's going to bite you if you take on that work. And just like you said, they're going to start looking at your clinical volume and say, well, why are you falling off? So you want to make sure that you protect yourself because your clinical volume will likely be impacted by taking on more administrative or non-clinical responsibilities. So be curious, and when in doubt, play dumb. And one other thing to think about that I've experienced, we've updated our language to say, we ask for negotiations, so you should use this as well. A lot of times we'll say, hey, I have another offer for X amount more. And employers responded by saying, well, that employer is different for arbitrary reasons. So when you're going through this negotiation process and starting to talk about the compensation, say I'm looking at offers from similar employers in the area. So now you can't deny that I'm talking to academics, and you can't deny that I'm talking to people in a similar geographic region. That amplifies why it's so important to have a narrow focus for where you're searching for your job, because it's just so hard to compare places all over the country. And frankly, a hospital in New York doesn't care what a hospital in California is doing. But a hospital in North Carolina, in Conway, North Carolina, does care what another hospital in that city is doing. I know that because of how much yelling I've done, you guys are going to be scared to call me. But please know, this is purely passion for doctors. I only want to see you be successful, and any small part that I can have in that, even if it's just giving you the answers to the test, I want to do that. My passion is for you all to be successful, and understanding there's a very real business to what you're about to go into that many doctors get kicked in the teeth in the first time they experience it. So I also want to share with you the realities of what you're walking into.